And so we had a little switch up with our speakers today. We're going to have Ryan another time. He's got some stuff going on. And so we're with Candis today. I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about what she does. And then we're going to get into talking about trauma and resilience and wellness and all of that stuff. So Candis, I'm happy to be with you. I always love talking to Candis. And so y'all are going to get some of Candis today as well.
Thank you, Denise. I'm glad to be with you today. I am Candis Walker. I serve as the prevention counselor for Watauga County Schools. And my training is as a school counselor. And before that, I served as a special educator. So I've been working in public schools in Western North Carolina, right here in our little corner, either Watauga or Avery County for 20 years, 22 years actually. And enjoy working with kids and forming relationships with kids and families. And the more we learn about trauma and adversity and resilience, the more I'm glad to know how important that work is.
Thanks, Candis. So we talk about, when we do our presentation, the WCCI trauma and resilience presentation, that the higher your rate of childhood trauma, the higher your ACEs score, the more likely you are to have substance use or misuse issues, addiction issues later on. Anything, I guess I'd like to hear a little bit about some of the kids that you work with, the range of ages. You and I had done the Watauga Parents for Prevention group for a few years. And it was interesting to me how resolutely people held on to the belief that that wasn't going to happen till high school. So can you talk to us just a little bit about some of the things that you see, and if you do know any of the backgrounds of the kids, some of the environments they tend to come from, and how maybe they don't necessarily look like trauma is supposed to look?
Absolutely. I think probably one of the most important things for us to realize is that substance use and misuse, it does not discriminate. It can touch families that have had lots of trauma, and it can touch families that have no trauma. So I think that's a good eye opener for all of us. If we think that we're doing all the right things, great. And even if we're not doing the right things, that's okay too, because learning those resiliency skills that can help us to make better life choices, healthier coping strategies, can be effective no matter what our background is, as is the flip side of that coin. Even kids from really healthy, supportive families can tumble into making unhealthy choices whenever it comes to coping strategies. So that's one of the reasons why I really think that my job as prevention counselor is a universal service position. I try to figure out ways to do some universal training, meaning for all students in all schools at all ages, because it's fighting against substance misuse is not something that just impacts kids from trauma. That being said, if a kid does have a background of family adversity, it does increase their likelihood of headed down that road of making unhealthy coping choices. So the more tools we can give them, the younger we can give them those tools, the better chance we're giving them to stay away from those unhealthy choices.
I've talked about this before. I know this is true in the school system. Teachers want us to give them a checklist of how it's supposed to look, what they're supposed to be looking out for. And so when you say all backgrounds and all trauma histories, I'm thinking of a 17-year-old who I was having a conversation with yesterday, and she said, teachers don't understand the depth to which I deal with depression and anxiety and how to handle those, because I look normal and I'm from a good family. And anytime we talk about those things, she said, people are always so surprised that I struggle with that because I look like they think I'm supposed to look. And so I appreciate you pointing out that it affects all of us. I know in my family, we struggle, most of us, with addiction. And You know, whether you're college educated or high or low socioeconomic status, it's still definitely an issue. I think another myth that we have about Watauga County is that Watauga County is kind of insulated and immune to some of the things that bigger cities have, but obviously you wouldn't have a job if we didn't have kids who are dealing with substance use and misuse. So can you talk some about numbers or statistics, or, you know, how frequently you're doing the job that you're doing?
Sure. Well, I can say that numbers and statistics are certainly higher in the past month than they were almost all year last year. And I think that's just about access. It's about kids being back in person in school. Does it mean that they have more access to substances to experiment with? Maybe. Does it mean that they are taking higher risks in using those at school, so they're more likely to get caught? Maybe. Or you know, maybe it's that they're using because they're looking for stress relief. It's been a hard however many months we're into now with this pandemic. Are we up to 18, 19, 20 months, whatever it is? It's been a hard time. So kids are definitely looking for something that's going to help them with their anxiety or depression or whatever they're identifying in themselves. They just want to feel better. And they're wanting that so badly that they're willing to risk doing it at school. So when they get caught, that's when I get to know about it. Sometimes I get to help kids on the prevention side, especially at the younger grades, teaching them the strategies that we teach with our calm corners and resilient strategies, stress management, all that sort of stuff. So the hope is that those numbers will decrease as we have more kids who have those strategies. I don't have a lot of numbers from last school year. Don't have a lot of stats because when you're not in the building, you don't get caught.
Well, and I was thinking about that as you were talking. If you haven't had a child in the public school system, or if you were WVA or virtual or homeschooling or don't have children. So last year we were virtual till October. So we had the spring before where pretty much nobody knew really what was going on and just hoped for the best, really. And then we had last year virtual till October, half the time, Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, with other 3 days being virtual till January. And then we came 4 days, I think, in the spring. And now we're 5 days. So in a year, the kids that have been in school have done at least 4 different formats. And some kids even tried online learning and then came back to, you know, went back and forth a few times. So possibly easily 5 or 6, depending. And so when you're talking about the amount of stress, and some kids do really, really well with online learning. I said the spring that it started, any arrogance that I had about parenting, which I have a 22-year-old and a 17-year-old, and definitely my arrogance has sharply decreased as the older, it's proportional to their age, right? So as their age goes up, my confidence in my parenting goes down. But my daughter said that first spring, like, this online learning is not for me. And so I would say to people, I guess there's parents who can do online learning and it's not an issue, but for us, it really leveled me, like brought me to my knees. You cannot force a teenager to open a laptop and log on and do their work. So I know it's incredibly stressful, not just for the kids, but for the parents too. And so now we're back in the building 5 days. Nobody's done a 5-day school week in a year and a half. And so not only are they tired and stressed, but the point that you make about they're in the building more. So they have different opportunities now, and not only to get caught, but also just to access things they may not have accessed before because they were home. So that's a good thing.
I think that we saw a decrease in casual use of substances at the very beginning of the pandemic among teenagers, unless they happen to have access to it at home somehow. which having access to substances in the home is always something that I want to bring to the attention of parents, because I think that we may not consider that our darling little cherubs, our angels, might get into something that they ought not to get into. So if we have alcohol in the home, if we have prescriptions or nicotine or marijuana, if we have any of that in our homes, protecting our kids from getting into that is really important. Not just babies and toddlers, that's important to lock things up so that they can't get to them accidentally, but for our upper elementary and middle schoolers and high schoolers, if it's secured and locked up, then there's not that chance that they'll maybe get into it one day out of curiosity, or because somebody at school said, hey, can anybody get some of this and bring it to school? Or because they have a friend over who says, does your dad have any beer in the fridge? All of these things for a body that's not fully developed yet and a brain that's not fully developed yet can be harmful. I talk with kids a lot who talk about using marijuana, and I say, I get your argument that it's legal in some states and some people think that's a wonderful thing, but bottom line is, if your body and brain aren't fully developed yet, then it can be harmful to you. If you want to do it, just wait till your body and brain are finished developing. So securing things that we might have in our homes is real important to help just build a barrier for kids.
Someone asked Candis in the chat, have you noticed any correlation between substance misuse and being bullied?
Personally, have I noticed that? I don't think so. I don't think that I have heard kids talk about that that's a coping strategy that they're looking for because of dealing with that. But I think that for most kids, they're looking for something to help them feel better. And it could be related to bullying. I'm sure there's some stats and some research out there. I'd have to do some research myself and find some backup on that.
Well, and so we, just in the context of the conversation, a lot of people on here know about adverse childhood experiences and ACEs and the original 10 and all of those things were, what all of each one of those things were. There's been a lot of research since then that has significantly expanded that list to include community violence and chronic medical illness and immigration status. And one of the things that researchers have found can be a traumatic experience is bullying. So when you're talking about, traumatic experiences tend to contribute to a rise in substance misuse, then it would make sense that those two might correlate. There's another question. What is the best way? Oh, this is a good one. What is the best way to store legal substances for adults, such as alcohol and nicotine?
Such as alcohol, and what was the other one?
Nicotine.
Well, it's good to have a place that the alcohol is, that it's always stored. I know that there are families that have a refrigerator in the garage, and that's where they put all their alcohol, and it's got a padlock on it. You could have a padlock on a liquor cabinet. There are locks that you can get to go on a wine bottle that has a combination on the top, and it's just an easy thing to just twist it, set it to the code that you want to set it to. It doesn't always have to be locked as long as it's secured. If you know how much you have and how much is in the bottles and how many bottles you have, and you just keep an awareness about that. And I think it's important to say to your kids, this is in the house. I know how much I'm consuming. I know how much the legal adults in this house are consuming. If there's some missing, I'm going to recognize that, and we're going to have a discussion about it. And we're going to figure out what happened to it. Do we have a burglar? What's going on? So I think just being upfront about it is a big piece of it, but there's certainly ways to secure it. Lots of strategies out there for securing alcohol. There are lock boxes available. I know Western Youth Network has lock boxes available. Could be the Children's Council has those available too. I bet somebody on here can tell us that for sure. But we definitely have places in our community that have their little lock boxes enough to fit several prescriptions in, that you can put your medications in and lock that up. And those are easy to come by and usually free at these community agencies. You could use that for nicotine too, if you think there's a reason to. And this is an extra step that's a little bit of a trouble. It's a little bit of an inconvenience to secure these items. Is it worth it to make sure your kids are safe? Yeah. Is it worth it to, there we go. Amber says, yes, medication lock boxes available. Thank you, Amber. I knew somebody would be on here that would know that. It's inconvenient, but I think it's worth it to be able to say to your kids, it's here, I've secured it. I don't want you to be tempted by it. I don't want you to have friends who are trying to convince you to bring it. And have those open conversations with kids.
A couple kind of community trends that I'm thinking about that I must see if you have anything to say about. So I was at the senior meeting the other night, and someone at the senior meeting, a school person, we sat through an hour of colleges and FAFSAs and all that stuff. And then at the end, he may have even taken off his badge and sat down on the stage and said, so I'm going to talk to you now like a parent. And I just want you to know that in this community, there's college parties, and that sometimes our kids find their way there. And that I usually don't hear that till like May of senior year. And he said, I'm already hearing it. And so I'm saying to you, I want all of our kids back here again on Monday. And so if you're a parent, if you're sitting here, please know what your child is doing and who they're with and where they are. And let's all try to keep them safe together. I was so impressed by that, but also so concerned. I mean, obviously we're in a college town, and I've been hearing for years about how high schoolers go to college parties. But for him to say, usually I hear about this in May, I'm already hearing about this in September. That was troubling to me. And do you have any thoughts about that, or kind of how that trend's happening in our community right now?
Yeah, I had that same conversation with that same high school staff member, and just hearing his anecdotes of where he's hearing about parties is mind blowing. And I have to think that part of it is this freedom that all of a sudden has occurred again with college students. We went for over a year and a half without being a college town that was full of college students. And now all of a sudden we have 20,000 extra teen and young adult bodies in our community again. And they've been cooped up wherever they were cooped up. And now they're back with friends and peers. And just anecdotally, I just have to wonder if everybody's sowing some wild oats and loosening up a little bit. We've been so locked down. I think it's just sort of a normal, natural process. So to me, that just means that there are more opportunities for our younger teens to have access to things that they wouldn't have had access to a year and a half ago when we were in lockdown.
Yeah. And you and I have had conversations before about that. It's okay to ask questions. It always surprises me when a parent texts me and says, my child's coming to your house. I just want to make sure that you're going to be there and that that's okay with you. Like, that's something that we do, but I rarely see that in other parents. It's always interesting to me when that happens. So just kind of validating that it's okay to ask where your child's going and who they're going to be with, and have those conversations with them as we all work to keep our kids safe.
As long as they're living in our house, we have that right to ask those questions about their safety. I think that's really important. And there's I see lots of names of folks on here who have kids older than mine, who have more wisdom to share. And so if anybody has wisdom about how to manage those kind of conversations, we'd love to hear from you too.
Yeah, that's great. Great prompt. So talked a little bit about trauma and rates of prevalence. Let's talk a little bit about the things that you do when you're working with kids, both on the prevention side, maybe even where referrals come from, and then the direct intervention, like one-on-one with kids, the types of things that you do to help kids build resilience and build strengths and make healthy choices.
Well, let's talk about prevention first. that's probably the biggest percentage of my job, is doing that prevention work, which has sort of morphed over the years as WCCI has grown in Watauga County. The sister of WCCI has been the Compassionate Schools movement in Watauga County Schools. And we've grown hand in hand together. And our Compassionate Schools movement encourages families, students, educators, all to think about how adversity and resilience impacts learning. So we have lots and lots of classrooms and teachers who are trained in teaching kids resiliency strategies. And for me, anytime we can teach kids about how to do some progressive muscle relaxation, or how to do some breathing techniques that help manage stress, anytime we do something like that, we are giving kids a healthy coping strategy. So that's a big piece of what I do now. I am teaching, I'm training, we're installing calm corners. We've talked about calm corners on here before. The calm corners are basically, it's an opportunity for us to go into a classroom and teach kids a little bit about how their brains work. We use the hand model of the brain, talk about flipping your lid when your emotions get big. We talk to kids about strategies that they can use to calm back down whenever they flipped their lid, and teach. I like to tell kids I want to give them a buffet. I want to give them an all-you-can-eat buffet, so that you have so many strategies to choose from that there's going to be one or two that you really like that you're going to use. And most of the ones we teach are ones that you can do anywhere, anytime. And we talk about that. We say these are strategies you can use at home. You can use them in the backseat of the car when your brother's bothering you. You can use this at the doctor's office. You can use it at grandma's house. You can use it at church. You can use it in the classroom. You can use these strategies walking down the hall. Anywhere you are, you can use these strategies for cooling off and calming down and keeping yourself more even, so that you can use your thinking brain in school. And then, of course, the biggest part of the calm corner that most people think about, it's not the biggest part in my brain, but most people think, oh, it's this box of tools, this toolkit that we get to have in our classroom whenever kids are flipping their lid and they've lost it. This is a place that they can go in the classroom, that they can use some tools, some squeeze balls or some stretch bands, that they can get out some of that nervous energy, some coloring or writing, having some noise reduction headphones, things like that. All of those tools and strategies that we teach them how to use and make available in their classrooms. So to me, that's one of my biggest prevention strategies that I have in my toolkit, is teaching kids and encouraging teachers. You know, I get maybe 30 minutes with a group of kids. If I'm lucky, I get invited back again and again. But most of the time, we are just in there for 30 minutes to give just a little bit of information. But what I really want to do is teach teachers that it's great to have brain breaks built into their school day, that it's okay for them to let a kid have something in their hands while they're listening, to give that nervous energy a place to go so that their brain can be thinking. So part of it is changing adults' attitudes about coping strategies that kids might want to use. And part of it is teaching the kids the coping strategies that they use. So that's a big piece of my prevention. I also do some other prevention. I do some direct teaching. I've got some curriculums that I use that teach media literacy, how to recognize what the media puts in front of us and whether or not we want to believe that what the media says, specifically in looking at advertisements for substances like alcohol and tobacco or nicotine products. I've also got another curriculum that I use that's more specifically about vaping, using those kind of products for inhaling nicotine or other substances. So those curriculums, I get to go into classrooms, typically starting at 5th grade, sometimes 4th grade, all the way up through high school. So I get to deliver those curriculums, and that's a more directed prevention strategy. So that's all the prevention end.
I was going to say a couple things about Calm Corners because we do those together, and it's definitely one of the funnest parts, most fun parts of my job. For people who don't have a Calm Corner at home, who have young kids, we've put in 120 in the school system in the past 3 or 4 years. She's probably going to get one if I'm guessing right. But frequently when we're putting them in, we will have a child who says, we need one of these at my house. My dad needs one of this at my house. My mom needs this in our car. And so just a kind of plug that if you don't have something like this in your house, it's a great way to normalize emotions and give kids tools for regulating emotions. And so almost every household I know has one of those liquid motion toys. And so when you tell kids that helps regulate their emotions and calm down their brain, they're astonished because they've already got one of those. So these are some of the things in our Calm Corner kits. There's about 10 to 12 things. The other thing I was going to say while she's holding stuff up, we went in and did a training one time with 7th grade. That's one of those like flex it things where you can twist. We went into 7th grade once and did a training on identifying and regulating emotions, and we were in there about an hour. And when we were done, a 7th grade boy said, my whole life they've been telling me to calm down and nobody ever told me how. And his joy at knowing something that he felt had, he didn't have that tool his entire life, it was visible on his face. And it was just a really good reminder to me that a lot of times we tell kids to be still, be quiet, and they really don't have the tools to do those things. So I just want to make a couple more plugs for Calm Corners that don't just have to be in classrooms.
Absolutely.
So prevention stuff. And now tell us what you do with individuals who have been referred to you.
Well, a lot of times I teach them about their brain, and I do the hand model of the brain, and I ask them what they do for stress relief. And then we talk about some strategies that they could do for stress relief. Here's the thing. What I know about kids is once they've been caught drinking or smoking pot or using a vape, some of them are horrified by that and they're never going to do it again. Some of them have parents who are horrified by that and are going to make sure their kids don't do it again if that's within their control. Some of them are already addicted and have been using nicotine or something since they were 11 or 12 or 13 years old. And I'm getting to them when they're 18 and about ready to graduate high school. And one session with me is not going to change their mind on using whatever it is that they like to use. So we talk about harm reduction, reducing whatever it is that they're doing that could cause harm to their body and brain. And we talk about healthy coping strategies. I met with a young man this week who is graduating in December, and he's been using nicotine, either dip or vapes or smoking, since he was in 7th grade. And one conversation with me is probably not going to change his life. But we had a conversation about how he could change one thing. He gets up every morning and has a Mountain Dew for his first thing that he puts in his mouth, followed immediately by a hit on his vape. So he's caffeinating and sugaring and nicotining, very first thing. And I said, as you get older, some of those things may come back to bite you. Is there one of those that you might replace with something that might be healthier? Because he knows. He sat through the classes. He knows what's healthy. He said, well, maybe I could drink water occasionally instead of Mountain Dew. Awesome. Good for you. Water is great for your brain. It's a good thing for you. And then he said, I only asked for one. And then he said, maybe I could wait until later in the day to have my first hit on my vape. I said, maybe you could make it through the school day so you don't get caught and get in trouble again. He said, yeah, that might be worth it. It's only till December. So it's about harm reduction, and it's about suggesting having some other opportunities for managing stress and managing anxiety if that's what they're going through. It's good stuff.
I'm going to answer Mary's question. I'm going to come back to you and ask you where your referrals come from. Mary asked about funding for Calm Corners. So just a quick blurb that all of our Calm Corners are funded by the community. They've come from funding from App Health, churches, businesses, individuals. And so the 120 that we have found that we've put in, those cost about $120. So over $10,000 of worth of Calm Corners have been funded by our community, which we're so grateful and thankful for. So we just recently started another push. We put in our last 10 or so from last year. And so we are doing a fundraiser right now to raise more money for Calm Corners. So if you wanted to do that, it's actually a county-wide initiative. And so every school has them. They even have them at the high school. And our goal personally is that they will be in every classroom in every school by the time we're said and done. So if you wanted to help support that project, you're welcome to email me or call me, and we can tell you how to do that. So, and if you want to earmark it for a certain school, we can do that as well. So thanks, Mary, for asking. So another question is incorporating Calm Corners at home for folks on a budget. So the things that we put in a Calm Corner, we search diligently for the cheapest options because it's somebody else's money. But you can buy stress balls, you know, really depends on trying to find the cheapest thing for the cheapest price. We've managed to find stress balls for like $1, not ordering in bulk, but we frequently order them 3 for $12 from Amazon. So my advice, having put together so many of these, is to only pick like 4 things, maybe at first, and then add to it as you go. So like a liquid motion toy is a couple of bucks, a stress ball is a couple of bucks, relaxation coloring book's about $4. And I'm trying to think of another really common helpful thing that we do. A journal, a composition notebook's $1. So I think you could get a Calm kit with like 4 things in it for less than $10, and then you can add as you go if you want to do that. So that's my advice. What do you have to say about that, Candace?
And I think that most people who have kids will have things that they can put in a special box and call this is our chill kit. This is our relaxation station, whatever you want to call it. My 10-year-old made this be the chillax box. And this just has stuff that we've put in it from around the house. It's got stuff that I've picked up at conferences, like this thing is a conference giveaway twisty thing. These are just some building tools, building toys that my kids have outgrown. I've got some Play-Doh. Play-Doh is relatively cheap, and most households have Play-Doh or Silly Putty, something like that. I've got a box of Legos. I've got tiny bubbles. I call this brain first aid. I took this to a classroom this morning, an EC self-contained classroom, and I said, this is brain first aid. You can have it, Ashley. You can steal the chillax box. But having a little box of bubbles, and these come, I think, 22 a pack at the Dollar General, and you know there's a Dollar General close by because they're everywhere. And this is easy to throw in your bag or to have sitting around the house, and take a deep breath and blow some bubbles, and that gets our brains relaxed again. A rubber band can be a great stretching tool to get out some of that energy. We've got exercise bands. I actually found these at Dollar General yesterday too. And this is something new. I had a Calm Corner that we hadn't had funded yet, so I wanted to pick up some things to put in it. So I went to Dollar General yesterday and spent about $12. These are for hair curlers. They're flexible hair curlers. Who would have ever thought about something like that? But it's something cool to fidget with. So things that you already have in your house, put them together in a kit and say, this is our box of tools that you use if you need to chillax.
So kind of the precursor to the Calm Corner to me is the identification of emotions. So pretty much everybody that knows me knows I come from a high background of childhood trauma, and there was nothing about emotions or regulation in my house. We don't talk about our emotions. We react to crisis. It honestly wasn't until I started doing trauma work like 7 years ago that I was like, oh, I can still learn this even though I'm as old as I am. So one of the things we did at Hardin Park School, we go by an emotional regulation scale. This is part of the Calm Corner kit, is A 1, I'm doing fine, I can learn. A 2, not the best, but I still can learn. 3, starting to have a big emotion, and we teach them seat skills like breathing and chair pulls. 4, I need the use of a tool, so I'm going to go to a calm corner for 5 minutes, and then a 5 is I can't manage this without the help of an adult. And so it was really critical to us that you can't know when to go to a calm corner unless you know what emotion you're having. And so whenever we put in a calm corner, we spend some time talking to kids about that 5-point regulation scale and the things they can do at each step. And then we wanted parents to be on board. So we made this into a magnet, and we sent this to every household in our district in Hardin Park last year. For 900 of them, it was about $600. So we raised the money for that, hoping that the language now, no matter where you are in our building, we all use the same language. And even at home, you'll have the same language. So I always say when kids are their most upset is when we ask them the most questions. So what's wrong? What did you do? How come? What do I have to do to fix it? What do you need to do next? And a kid can't breathe or talk. So we give them the rating scale, and that way when we see a kid who's upset in the hall, they can give us a number and not have to explain anything right then. So we feel like it's really critical to do the emotional regulation piece before we teach about calm corners. That all goes together. And I always say most of the people in prison are there because they don't know how to regulate their emotions. It's just really important to us that we help them do that here, because a lot of kids, especially from trauma, don't have that modeled for them at home. So prevention. Calm corners have become a really big part of what the both of us do. So I'll keep watching chat. Candis, where do your referrals come from?
Most of my referrals for responsive services come from the high school. They're kids that have gotten in trouble. That's the way most of that goes. And those kids, whenever they get in trouble for vaping or for using alcohol, they come across my desk pretty quickly, and I get to meet with them. But 1 or 2 sessions with me is not very much in the grand scheme of things. So I'm glad that we're teaching these skills universally as prevention skills and not just waiting to respond. I occasionally have some referrals at the middle school levels too. I've had some of those in the past couple of years where there have been rumors that kids are vaping or different things like that. They're not necessarily in trouble yet, but we're trying to get ahead of it. We think that they probably are. So then I get to come do some targeted prevention lessons in a classroom or targeted prevention work with an individual or a couple of individuals. So they come from within the schools.
Do kids refer themselves or seek you out themselves or refer their friends? Does that ever happen? I'm just curious.
Occasionally. It's not near as often that they would refer themselves, but occasionally that does happen.
Okay, so we've talked about trauma and your job and prevention and intervention. Let's talk a little bit about wellness. I'll just brag on Candis. When we talk about #1 factor to offset trauma is relationship with a positive, consistent, caring adult. Candis is my positive, consistent, caring adult. So I'm always interested in hearing her talk about how she stays well and balanced. And frequently, I've talked to you before about just the audience in general. I feel like the part of my brain that was engineered in trauma is like a peach pit. It's hard and black and creviced. And then the part of my brain that's healthy, trying to overcome that, is like the pink, healthier part of my brain. And I feel those two parts button up against each other sometimes. So Candis is my person I go and say, so this happened. And this part of my brain wants to do this, and this part of my brain wants to do this, and I really need somebody who has a different perspective to try to help me figure out what's the most healthy choice for me right now. And so that's been a huge blessing in my life to have. So thank you for being my positive, consistent, caring adult, Candis.
My pleasure.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what you do to stay healthy and well and maintain boundaries and all of that stuff?
Sure. So the more I learn about how our brains work and how stress and anxiety work, the more I'm fascinated by the brain-body connection. I'm fascinated by vagus nerve. the study about vagus nerve connections and how our brain and body are connected, and how what we do with our bodies impacts how our brain works and how our brain feels and how our emotions work. So a physical exercise is more important to me than it was 5 years ago. One, because I got to take care of it because it ain't getting any younger. And two, because I know it helps me to stay even. And I talk to kids sometimes about, we feel like we're on an emotional roller coaster and we go up and down and have really big highs and lows. And I know for me that if I have my morning walk every day, and now it's dark whenever I need to do my morning walk. So we invested in a treadmill and I get to get on that every day. Or if I get to sleep in a little bit on the weekends, I get to go have my morning walk outside in the fresh air after the sun has come up. That's super important for me to do that 5 or 6 days a week. So that's a big piece for me. Usually while I'm walking, I'm listening to a devotional that I subscribe to, and I get a little bit of a spiritual lift from that. And I have that opportunity to have brain, body, and spirit connect all at one time. And it's nice to be able to do that. I try to eat pretty healthy. I don't drink sodas. I don't drink caffeine. I drink more water than anything else. I try to eat pretty healthy. Sometimes I'll snack out with my kids and we're eating stuff that's not that great for me, but I try to pay attention to that because I know that if I put in junk that I feel junky. So I try to pay attention to that. And I've gotten to a place in my life where when I need what I need, I go and get it. And like my husband is my sounding board. And I have learned that I need to say to him sometimes, I need you to listen. I need you not to try to fix it. I need you not to try to make it better. I need for you to just listen. And when I'm done, I want you to say, man, that sounds hard. That's all I need. And then I tell him whatever I got to get off my chest, because otherwise he goes into I'm here to fix things mode. And I don't need that sometimes. I just need somebody to listen. So that's nice to have gotten to that place in my life, in my maturity, and in our relationship that I can tell him what I need, and he respects that. And I do the same for him.
That is a great example of being able to ask what you need in a calm, reasonable way.
Well, it's not always calm, but I try.
It sounded calm when you were describing it.
Right. I'm on my best behavior right now.
Yeah, I understand. The second part of that question has been, and how do you know when you need to do those things? What does your body do to let you know that you need to invest in some wellness or some care for yourself?
Well, I think about like whenever I teach kids about whenever they're about to flip their lid, we talk about physical sensations in our bodies, about how our heartbeats increase, or we can feel ourselves getting hot in the face, or we feel upset stomach, or we feel like we're shaky. For me, whenever it's anger, it's my throat. My throat gets really tight and it hurts. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I am not okay with this, and I'm going to blow my top, and something's not okay, and I need to walk away, or I need to drink some water, or I need to take some deep breaths. So that's my physical symbol of I've hit my too far, too much. I can't do it anymore. It seems like there's not really a middle ground for me. I'm doing pretty good and I'm staying level and I'm doing what I need to do to take care of myself, or I'm throat's hurting and I'm all clenched up and I'm about to blow my top. So it's kind of weird for me. So I look for those symbols and I try to do my strategies that I know I need to do to keep myself even so that I don't blow my top.
Yeah, sometimes easier, not sometimes. Usually easier not to get there than it is to come down from there, for sure.
Right, absolutely.
So if anybody has any questions or comments for Candis, or anything that you would like to say for me to email her later, you're welcome to do that now. We'll give another minute or so for comments or questions or thoughts. Candace, anything, so you have an audience here of 25 grown-ups. Anything that you would like to say either about prevention with youth or building relationships with people with trauma experiences, and anything that I didn't think to ask you before we go?
I would say that one of the most important things that we do is assume nothing about trauma, that you can't tell by looking at somebody whether or not they've had trauma necessarily. And the strategies and practices that are good for people who have trauma in their backgrounds or have adversity in their backgrounds, those strategies and practices are good for everybody. Whenever we first started training in the schools, I said that I was very selfish about the reason why I want our schools to be trained and our teachers to be trained, because I want my own sons to grow up learning these things. And they're going to learn them better sometimes from a teacher than they are from me. It's kind of like the shoemaker's children have no shoes. So I want the teachers that are influencing my children to be teaching these strategies in the classrooms, so that my children can grow up with healthy coping strategies. So I think those are the biggest things. It's universal. Don't make assumptions. Just practice good coping strategies across the board and do it every time you have a chance.
It's one of the reasons that we love to start meetings with the resilience skill. So you can see that it only takes 3 minutes, that it's easy to incorporate, and that people, I know I need an excuse to stop for 3 minutes and just breathe, because I sit down in a chair at school and I turn around, it's time to go home and I haven't eaten or gone to the bathroom. So practicing resilience skills in the groups that you're in as well. So Candace, thank you so much for being with us. I always enjoy talking to you and learn so much from you. And we appreciate you sharing what you do. One last time, if you have a comment for Candace, if you want to type that in the chat, I'll email those to her so she can read them later on. And I hope everybody has a good rest of your day. I look forward to seeing you here next week on Wednesday at noon. And if you need anything in the meantime, let me know.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Denise.